Alrighty, hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. I'm Michael Valliant-Saunders. I'm going to be part of the tag team here with my uncle Walter as we look to bring to the world some content on thought leadership and kind of the need for and dependency that we kind of need to drive and the learning that we need to drive in the market as far as thought leadership. So, as I mentioned, Walter, glad to have you today. Ultimately,
Glad to
this
be
was your
here.
idea.
This is
So,
fun.
yeah, fantastic. Like we were saying, where else would you rather be?
Nowhere
Get to
else.
get to spend some time with my uncle, get to spend
That's
some time
right.
with my cousin in the background,
That's
pulling the
right.
strings like the Wizard of
That's right.
Oz. Pay
That's
no
right.
attention to Justin. But yeah, no, I'm excited. So ultimately, this was your idea, Walter. So I'm glad that you and I talked about it a while ago, and I'm glad that we've kind of at that point now where it's come to fruition. It's materialized, right? We were talking the other day about vision, right? And about this kind of nebulous thing. So this is
Mhm.
now the hard concrete reality of the podcast. So that's exciting. But what I'd love to do is obviously you and I know each other, right? We've got a long history.
Absolutely.
A lot of our listeners don't necessarily know who you are, don't know who I am. So what I'd love to do is maybe set a little bit of the foundation of kind of your beginning, and then maybe also how you and I connected. And I'll kind of start with myself. So yes, you're my dad's brother. So we're
Mm.
connected that way. Interesting fact, and you know this, right? But my dad and my mother were never married. So I would maybe see my dad once or twice a year. You and I would see each other maybe once or twice a year.
That's right.
But I would say, before I kick it over to you, of all of my uncles, my relatives, I've always felt a certain affinity that you and I've had through the years. We're very similar minded. Obviously, we've followed some very small similar paths in our careers. But
100%.
yeah, that's really why I'm excited to be here because honestly, you're a true mentor for me. So love to start this conversation. So set the stage for us. Tell our listeners about where you grew up, your kind of family situation. What was that for you as a young Walter?
Sure. Well, you know what's interesting about where you grow up has very little to do where you are. And we grew up on just a farm in a place called Calumet Island on the Ottawa River. Population less than 1,000 people, half French, half English, and half not so sure. Uh, and basically, you know what? We just my parents being farmers and me being the youngest of the family of seven.
Big
Your
family.
father, Michael, my one of my first mentors in life, where we talked about what the meaning of this or that was, and I got to say that that the biggest appetite for learning came from him, but also from my mom, where if I look at the business I've been in for my whole career, it's been selling something, and we were selling vegetables door to door when I was 12. It was wonderful, and just the whole excitement about understanding who the customer was and how we could produce something that they would enjoy better, and our guarantee of product excellence. I say, it's exactly the same as today. And by the way, we had door to door delivery. If you look at it today, you know what? It's not such a new idea. And the
It's
only thing
existed
is
forever.
we just didn't call ourselves with a big fancy name. It was like every Tuesday you could expect me and my mom in a certain town, and we would knock on all the doors. A little blonde kid, yes, I had hair then, and we'd have them all come out, and the women would come back, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And so yeah, it was great. So from the farmland to mainland, it was always about trying to figure out like how I fit. And so yeah,
Well, I
people.
mean, that must have been interesting, right? So you're the youngest,
That's right. Yeah,
right? You're the youngest of a family of, sorry, seven
seven kids
plus
and well, nine foster kids. Yeah,
and
so
nine foster kids. So
yeah,
massive, massive family. I mean, I think normal, probably not normal, more normal for the day and age.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure.
Absolutely, not normal today. But yeah, within that context, right? So you as the youngest, really trying to, hey, you're coming up last, you're kind of toeing the line. I imagine there's some level of, I got to keep up with all of these other kind of siblings who have blazed a trail or kind of set a standard or set a path. How was that for you? Was there an element of that as far as Yes, okay.
No,
I get to work with my mom, which is great. And we get to
you
do
have no
this selling
consciousness of
stuff.
that when you're a kid, right? So it's
Right.
like it's your reality is your reality.
Yeah.
I mean, and you come into this world and your parents are 45 years old already, and your
Mhm.
siblings are, I mean, one sister that was closer was as far as living in the same house at the same time, but for everything else, it was just the way it was. But
Right.
I would say that it more later in life where you're the last of the baby boomers and you're going into a world where all the best jobs are taken, all the best positions are
Mm.
taken, all the, that's like we're, baby boomers kind of locusts, right? They kind of eat everything up ahead of them. So when you're the last one in there, you got to fight for your way.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and coming from a place where education was, not a rite of passage, just something you have to do, you get the hell out of the house. And so, that there were exceptions, of course, that people have made it through that and they went to university and they had beautiful educations. But, for the most of us is, parents would say, get a trade because, that's what you should do. You can always fall back on a trade.
Right.
So I became a welder.
I was going to say, yeah, you did go
Yeah,
into,
it was horrible. Like it was like the worst thing ever.
oh dear. Yeah. One of those jobs where you get into it and you realize this is definitely not a good
Not
fit.
me.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit. You touched on the whole retail, and we'll get to that because obviously that's a big part of your career and
Yep.
experience
Yep.
from tip top on. But going back to those, yeah, those jobs kind of pre. So you did some selling on the farm, got some produce, got that kind of maybe bug, as it were, as far as that customer development, consumer
Right.
satisfaction, that engagement, right? You're a very social and outgoing person. So I'm sure that kind of fired a lot of, you know,
A lot better than talking to cows.
yeah, no. So welding, and then I think did you not also do a few other type of
Yeah,
jobs
I
in
mean,
between, test
welding
the
at some
waters?
point, you know what? I went out west because everybody was going out west in those days,
Right.
the late 70s. And I went out west based on a couple of leads and basically got a job as a welder, except that I was a welder's helper because the certificate that I got was not for high pressure welding. I said, okay, so I guess this is it. But, when I'm 17, who cares? So working as a welder, and then I decided that, you can't live life being miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what gave me the wisdom to understand that at a young age, but it was just, I will not. I made a deal with a friend of mine back then that we'll never do anything that we don't think is right for us,
Yep.
ever. 30 years later, I asked him about that deal, and he said, I have no clue what you're talking about. But it
That's
meant a
awesome.
lot to me.
But it left an impression. Yeah, it's so
That's
neat.
right.
Okay.
So we basically, and welding was, so you have to understand that we're in the middle of the prairies and it's minus 20 and the wind chill factor minus gazoo. And you're just saying, like, there's no fun in this. And so I started selling different things. And one day I decided that it was enough. This was not going to make me happy. And I decided to quit and just go into Edmonton at the time. Pretty cold in the month of January. And to the dismay of the family members that was with me at the time, was saying, like, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know, but I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to keep doing this.
Right.
And so I went into probably the worst time you could possibly go into downtown Edmonton in January. And before long, I became homeless. And so from a homeless situation, it was like, okay, that's new. The advantage, I guess, in my homelessness was that I could have called someone, but I didn't want to because I figured that if I have somebody bail me out, I will never know who I am. So yeah, so like a good 6 months of quite struggling, but again, I guess maybe naivety is a great thing, right? So I didn't know I was struggling. So I was just trying to figure out what is the next step. And one day there was an opening at a store to be a stock boy. And I said, well, let's try that. And truth is, I saw all the jobs that were happening at that time, and I just fell in love. I just said, "This is me," and I started relating that this was actually closer to those moments on the vegetable truck than anything else I'd done. And at that point, I believe it or not, even the army refused me because they said, "What's your permanent address?" I don't have one. What's your permanent job? I don't have one. They said, "Well, when you get one, let me know." If I knew who that recruiter was, I would have sent him a bouquet of flowers because he was right, right? It was like I was looking for like where do I fit in? So yeah, so once I got into that, I guess as they say, the rest is history. It was fun.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think that's to your point, at that age to recognize those things that you don't enjoy doing, right,
Yes.
is a critical learning. And I think we haven't not necessarily talked about it, but I talk to a lot of people about that very same idea. At the end of the day, as you build your experiences, you want to build up that list of things that this is what I really love or I really enjoy doing.
That's right.
These are the things that I don't enjoy doing. And my ideal job is going to have a lot of this and as little of this as I can. I mean, it is still called work, so we do have to work, and there is some stuff that we have to do that we don't like. Yeah, ultimately, we want to find that job or we want to blaze that trail in our career that has all or as much of that really good stuff that we love doing and focus on that.
I think what challenges people is that we don't feel we have actually that choice. You know, the challenge that I find is that in the area of work, but in the area of just everyday things, is like, do you understand the choices you're making? And then from there, understanding that by making those choices, you own it, right? You
Yeah.
own something here. I think that we have a tendency to build ourselves something we think is right at the time, it's possible, and then afterwards, we don't question whether it is actually worth changing. I mean,
Right.
I remember talking to somebody and saying, you keep complaining about the apartment you live in. And they said, well, yeah. I said, so what's wrong with the apartment? I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't like that. I said, okay, but you've been there for 5 years. Did you sign a lifetime lease? No. So what is it that you do want? And that's where it lies, right? So they can't answer
Yeah.
what is what they want. They just say what they don't want. So you say, no, no, be really clear. What is it that you want? And the first thing they'll say, well, I don't want noisy streets. Because it's a hard thing, right? It's a hard
Yeah.
thing. And sometimes maybe we think we don't deserve it or something. I'm not sure. But understanding that you have the choice and understanding you have to make it is probably the hardest things.
Now, would you say that's a characteristic that has been kind of endemic in kind of our society for years? Or is it more recent, kind of as we think about that younger generation coming up through it? And maybe it's a little bit of both. I don't know. But
I would think it's a bit of a human factor. I'm not sure. The risk taking is not, it's a skill in itself. And I think taking any kind of risk, I think I did an experiment once with somebody who had, quite frankly, very little. And I challenged them. I said, so you have very little. What if we had an opportunity to give you something that would be a bit more and more comfortable? And we're talking housing at that time. And the person immediately answered, but I'd give up this. But this has got no opportunities for you. But it was like, but I don't know that. That's
mm,
nice,
yep,
but I'm comfortable here. So I think it's a human nature thing. I don't think it's a generational thing. I think it's been around for a long time.
it's just a long time. Yeah. And it makes sense, right? There's that fear of the unknown. There's that fear of making a mistake, I think is also an element,
That's right.
right? I know what I hear a lot of now is, well, I don't want to make the wrong choice, right? And I mean, you and I both have kids, and you often hear it sometimes from the kids, and going, well, at this stage, there's no wrong choice, right? Everything
That's
is
right.
going to lead you somewhere. It's just make a decision. To your point, make a choice, own that choice, and then see where it leads you.
100%.
But yeah, I think that's a good point. I want to maybe switch gears a little bit here. I obviously have been talking about making that list of things that you didn't enjoy doing, finding that thing. I mean, it sounds like almost a good stroke of luck, really, right? To be able to get that job in the back room stocking, right? And then
100%.
to be able to look around and see those opportunities and be able to have the wherewithal to go, okay, yeah, not only can I see myself doing this job today, but I also can see I'd be excited to do that job and then that job and then that job. What do you think really then is the, as we talk about choices and as we talk about people maybe opening up their eyes to what opportunities there are, how do we maybe start building those muscles or helping people build those muscles? Again, I think for you at 17, somehow, right, you kind of came maybe predisposed or pre-equipped with that, but that's not the case for everybody.
That's an excellent question that I don't think there's an easy answer to. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure there isn't one. But I would say one of the things that anybody who's worked with me in the last 30 years or more is live in the question of possibilities.
Hmm.
What are the possibilities? What could I do? I can't say to you that when I got landed this thing that I was able to say, this is where this is going to lead. I had no clue. But one day, this guy, his name is Pat Cadman, and he came across my path. He was a salesman in a store. And one day he said to me, he says, you know what? well, I'm going to take you under my wing. And I go, what? You're a bird? What is that? What do you mean you're going to take me under your wing? And he taught me lessons that was right for that moment in time for about, oh, I'd say almost a year. And lessons, hard lessons about all kinds of things that I would have had prejudices without even knowing them, coming from very isolated little town in the middle of Quebec. And it was all of a sudden there was this opening, and he was opening up possibilities for me.
Mm,
And I found that in my whole career, because I was living in the question of what's possible, people showed up.
right.
And
Okay.
even, I got to tell you that even in, we talk about our kids, but my kids show up and they started teaching me at a very young age. And it was teaching me, it was like a reflection of what I thought I was doing versus what they would feed back to me. And it was like, okay, I have some learning to do. I'm not that good a parent, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, I got
Yeah.
to do something different. All of a sudden you get lessons from everywhere, and some of them are hard, some of them are easy. But I think if you leave yourself open to the question, things just show up.
Yeah. So it sounds to me, and I'll just kind of play it back. There's two elements there, really. It's the leaving yourself open for the question,
Yep.
also being willing to kind of take advantage of the opportunity as it kind of comes your way,
100%.
so that you can see someone like Pat who, yeah, gives the offer, right? That you are, and there's a lot of kind of thought out there around say yes, right? I mean, coming from a theater background and coming from kind of an improv background, improv is all about the yes and,
That's right.
right? So something gets fed to you and it's all about yes and versus no. So it sounds, as you were just talking through that, that not only is it the be open to the question, but then it's also really be open to those experiences and individuals slash mentors who come into your life and recognize that
100%.
you're going to learn something, right?
But to add to that, I would say to you that it is absolutely a great ride.
Yeah.
It's a great ride. I mean, I've had people believe in me to promote me to a position, and I'm driving home saying, do they know who they just promoted? I mean, what do I got to give? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
But there's something about just going along, and then people, if you don't stay in the same place, you move around, you talk about what it is that you're thinking about, which allows people to come into that space. Magic can happen.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I had one guy tell me, he says, you know what, you're going to be my protege. And I said, that's great. I said, what the hell's a
What
protege?
does that mean?
So we spent, 10 years of working on my understanding of actually a lot of same things that I was beginning to think about.
Hmm.
And I think I helped him in thinking about how he was interacting with the world. And it became a wonderful partnership and a great learning. And quite frankly, I've done a lot of the things I teach today. I had a lot of the orientation based on this guy saying, hey, you're going to be my protege. I
Right.
remember we're on a plane coming back from the Maritimes. He says, I'm going to be my protege. I said, "Ah, that's nice. What the hell is that?"
I'll have the salted nuts, please.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, I mean, what a great experience, and obviously great opportunities to have those types of leaders or mentors kind of in your
100%.
experience to kind of bring you under their wing. And obviously, again, being open to the question, being open to the opportunity, saying yes is kind of it's twofold, right? A, they come because often it can be, and we talked about it, right? The opportunity could be there and it could be a no, thank you, or the not right now
Yeah,
because
for
it's not
sure.
great
That
timing,
happens a
right?
lot. Absolutely.
Versus the, yeah, let's do it, let's try it, let's see what happens, let's see what we can both learn from this. And often they are kind of both mutual, as we talked about, or you talked about the kids, right? Mutual learning there, right? In both directions. So
100%.
as we talk about kind of that learning from a mentor, what are some of those key skills, one or two key skills that you would have built early on in your career that then helped you transition from that kind of mentor space more into that leadership space?
Yeah, I think if you there's many things, of course, but the ability to listen intently
Hmm.
is probably the greatest skill a leader can have. People see themselves in a position of authority and they feel they must speak. We see that sometimes in politicians.
Not
And
recently, though.
not
Not recently.
recently. So the feeling that you must speak because you're the only one of authority is probably the worst environment that you can create dialogue. So if I say to you, tell me more, I'm listening, or my body says I'm listening, I'm intently paying attention. And it doesn't matter if you're 24 years old, somebody that I coached just this week, or if you're 54 years old or 102 years old, as long as you're listening to what the issues are, you have a chance, right? Because
Yeah.
if you can't truly listen, I don't know how you contribute to
Hmm.
anything.
Yep.
So listening, I think, is the biggest skill. And then vulnerability is probably another skill. I think that again, it's okay to say you don't know.
Mm.
It's okay to say, that's an interesting problem. I think I can help you because I know somebody, but I actually don't know the answer to this question. So vulnerability is good. And I think that naivety is also good
Right.
because I believe I can do anything. I mean, are you kidding me? I got a map behind me. I've been all around the world. I just believe there's no limitations to what I can do. So naivety has been, and people say, how can being naive be an opportunity? I don't know that I can't do it. I don't know that my lack of formal education was going to be an inhibitor. I don't know, and I can go on because I've
Yeah,
been
yeah,
naive in a lot of things. But it just, new business ideas, new context, starting a new career at my age, it's like wonderful.
yeah.
I don't know anything that can go wrong with the project that I'm doing with my son on this journey. I don't know. It's like,
Right,
yeah, I think we can do this. So naivety is a big thing.
right. So playing it back, right? Listening, right? It's
Yes.
almost, and we talked about this, right? It's the what is it? Seek first, understand, and then be understood,
Oh, I love
right?
that
So
one.
it's kind of that active listening, right? Versus listening for a response or listening for something. It's really that
That's right.
active listening.
Well, I think naivety is I
And
don't know, is number
naivety
two or
goes
number
back
three.
to that kind of questioning, right? That asking the questions, right? That I think to me really ties into that naivete about, yeah, you don't know what you don't know. It's a wonder and a beauty. It goes back to that feeling of uncomfortable though, right? And that people don't necessarily feel comfortable when they don't know, but to be honest and open, that was the second point, right? To be honest and open, it's all coming back to me now. Honest and open to be able to say, yeah, I don't know.
If you take those three things,
Yeah.
and a few others in there for sure, and you gather enough information and you gather enough, not a consensus, but you're smart enough to say that the direction we're going to take is this, and you do it with conviction, people will follow. I always say there's something great about everyone following a medium idea than no one following a great idea, right? If a medium idea gets you somewhere, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good idea. It's not a great idea, but it's a good idea. And everybody follows, boy, you make miles. But this is the great idea that nobody wants to do. So what?
There's at least movement, right, with following the good idea.
Yeah,
And
for
there's
sure.
change, and there is, making a step change. We've talked a lot about kind of what you learned, kind of those key pieces of advice. You talked about your career change. So you've just made this next big change, right? After
Yeah.
years in retail, in more kind of, and again, I'm going to oversimplify. You definitely keep me honest, but more in kind of a clothing, merchandise, as far as, fashion goes. Obviously, a few years in, I was thinking today, it's not just the luggage business because it was also,
It was
other
travel.
travel.
Anything you would bring something with you. So whether it be a handbag, a backpack, or
Yeah.
travel. So that was a learning curve that was interesting because it had a whole bunch of dynamics that in fashion you don't think about at all, right?
Yeah.
But now, yes, the anybody who looks me up on LinkedIn would see that I joined this great company called the MEL Group, and basically it is a distributor and a retailer of appliances, home appliances. And did I think I would ever be selling home appliances? Not even close. But an entrepreneur who had a vision that was extraordinary, that fits exactly what I can contribute at this time. And not to overuse an expression, but the universe delivers, and so we have a great partnership to get him to where he wants to go. And I feel very, very fortunate to be able to do this and to do what we're doing tonight. So yeah, it's great.
No, that's fantastic. One I think we had talked about yesterday too. So yeah, you just hit it here. Working in a, for a company in an industry that you would never imagine yourself working in, right?
Mhm.
Going back to that 18-year-old self and saying, if we talked to Walter at 18 and said, by the way, Walter, when you're this age, you're going to be working for a company. What would the 18-year-old Walter say to today's Walter?
I'd say, what are you talking about? I can't see next week. You know, we certainly would have many different impressions. You hear that question a lot. You know, what would you tell your younger self? And the truth is I've always had the ability to ask somebody the question right at the time that I need it. I've had the fortune of having so many mentors in my life, and I've had some mentors who were a mentor for a day. Some mentors were a mentor for a year, and some mentors are mentors for my whole life.
Mhm.
And the combination of those things allows you to say, what is it? What's the question I need to ask at this point in time? And based on that, and based on your entourage, the people around you, you might answer your own question, but at least you have the ability to kind of sort your thinking out. And it's the whole thing is just it's just wonderful. If you stay into your bubble and you don't take those risks and you don't ask those questions, well, of course, the world is going to be a nasty place for you, maybe. But
Yeah.
if you're out there and you're open and you're okay to be vulnerable, again, that vulnerability, I had to be vulnerable taking this job. What the hell do I know about dishwashers? I had nothing. Do I know more about it today? Yeah, a little bit. Everybody's trying to educate me, but the issue is I'm not there to sell dishwashers. I'm there to sell ideas, and I'm there to bring a group of people harmonized around the thought process that allows them to engage in their best self.
Hmm.
And to me, what would I tell my 18-year-old self? You're on the right path. Keep looking at how to be the best version of you. And as you learn going through life, you'll change who you are several times.
Right.
I'm not an actor by profession, but I've played many roles in my life, right? Because you change and the impact and the environment and people who influence you. And if you're open to change, it's just like it's a candy shop all the time. It's like, wow, I could
Right.
do that too.
Well, and I think for sure there's an element there, right? About that being open, going eyes wide in, really being accepting of whatever those experiences are. And ultimately, I would agree with you, right? Your experience with your life as a result of that is so much more positive,
100%.
right? And there's so much more kind of personal growth and development that we get from those types of challenges, right? And there's often a
Yep.
school of thought that just talks around, yeah, you got to get in that uncomfortable space, right? You got to make yourself almost go back to the drawing board and relearn. It's proven from a kind of longevity and just our ability to actually live longer, fuller lives, those types of things is one element of what we need for our brains, right?
I
To
agree.
retrain all those neural pathways. Ultimately, it's kind of going to end up you living a longer, better life. Added to the
And it's
fact
a
that
hell of a lot more
obviously,
fun.
yeah, for sure. And then, you kind of touched on it, right? All of those different experiences and all those different people that you meet also then opens you up to that much broader kind of world community, right?
Yep, I agree.
Which is a critical element as well of kind of our health. So, gonna switch gears and just talk maybe about that a little bit about as you think of your career and working in different industries and businesses. You've also lived from Edmonton to St. John's to Montreal. What, as part of your experience, has been some key learning from even just those types of changes, right? So, if we step away from the business element of it,
Sure.
those social, those communities. Let's talk through that a little bit as far as key core, I believe to be a key core from a true kind of leader and or some leadership.
So as soon as we start looking at how people are people, then the culture is enriching. And I think Canada has and getting more and more a beautiful tapestry of all kinds of cultures that are intermixing and changing. The tapestry of Canada is changing all the time. I mean, I can see we both have maps on back, and it was quite a coincidence. But to me, it's like the best country in the world is the country you're in, and make it the best because it has its privileges, it has its culture, it has its people, and the fundamental needs of people, they don't always get them, don't get me wrong, but
Yep.
I think the fundamental needs of people are pretty well the same.
So Walter, let's pretend you're a grown up. What is it you do?
Well, pretending I'm a grown up is what I've been doing for a very long time. I think the best answer to that is to say that I influence. if you take a look at somebody who starts in a career and you say, how much should I be paid? Young people, it's like, what should I be paid? And I would answer, well, you're paid whatever you're worth. And that means that within the skill set of what you're doing, you will get paid so much. And way back when I was a salesperson and I start seeing these salespeople that could do 4 times the amount of sales I could in the same period of time, I said, I guess I'm not a good enough salesperson. So going into management, I decided, what is the biggest thing? I don't know if I verbalized it this way back then, is that I get paid better if I influence more. And
Okay.
I've lived in that forever. It's like the more I can influence, first of all, the better I feel about that. But I always get a better pay based on the fact that it's worth more to influence 10 people than me doing the best I could possibly do on my own.
Right.
And now I know I've had up to 10,000 employees. So it's like, yeah, just keep going.
You just keep influencing.
That's right.
Fantastic. And then can you tell me why? I'm not going to say why are we doing this, but really, what's the thrust or what's the reasoning or rationale behind why you want to move in this direction as far as the podcast and then also everything else that you've got on offer?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think I've been influenced by, I won't say hundreds of people over a career that have suggested I better do something or they're not going to talk to me anymore. I mean, it's been something where you can make complicated things simple. And you see the relief on I'm talking very educated to not so educated people that are faced with it. It's complicated. Life is complicated. You talk about sitting through a technology meeting. It's complicated. You talking about how I'm going to go to market. It's complicated. So how can you take these things and make them simple in maybe just saying, well, live in the question. Well, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that behavior in itself will open up a lot of doors. There's things such as it's complicated managing people, period. Like, what are the things that are very important to people? People actually know them. They just make their life too complicated. Think about job descriptions, right? So you
Yeah.
say job description. Everybody's got to have a job description, 22 pages long. And I just look at it and I go, well, what are the 3 things you could be fired for if you didn't do? Every HR person in the world is going to cringe by hearing that. But think about it. We talk about all the things that we do in life. We have a list that goes on, but you say, but could you be fired for any of them if you didn't do them? The list gets quite short. The opposite of that is that's really what you're getting paid for, right? So it's the balancing of these things and many, many more. I mean, I think across the country, there must be 6,222 napkins in somebody's drawer of something I drove and said, I think this is a concept that might help you figure this thing out. So we're actually going to do a series on that. It's like the napkin approach, like be
Mhm.
simple. You don't have to it's complicated enough. Don't make more complications.
Right.
So I hope I can influence a lot of people. I think there's a lot of young people out there of all ages that are looking for answers and they have the answers. They just probably need a little bit of a nudge to help them think it through.
Right. So influence, question, simplify.
That's pretty well it. That's
No, that's
pretty well it.
awesome. That's great. I mean, at
In
the
a
end of the day,
nutshell.
right? It's yeah,
That's right.
it's focus. And we just think about it today in the day and age we live in and the devices in our hands, and the constant stream, right? We can get overwhelmed. So it is often the easiest thing to just step
I'll
back,
tell you a
simplify,
funny
and
story. I had
question.
lunch with somebody today that I work with. He's retired today, and he said, it's interesting that you're doing this journey because you have influenced more ways for me to think than my own mother. I said, I'm going to assume that's a good thing.
That's right. Yeah, I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you very
But the
much.
thing is, everybody has complicated things. How can you simplify it anyway? So it's like, yeah, it's fun.
That's awesome. Now, the pressure's on.
No pressure's on.
We're gonna take on some little lightning challenge.
Okay.
Okay, got a few questions for you. What would you say is a great book that you've read?
Well, I've read many, many great books, a lot of them fiction because you got to get your head out of the business sometimes.
Very true.
Yeah, it's I remember reading Shogun way back when, and it was like, wow, that was an endeavor, but it was a wonderfully written book, John Clavell. But I got to say that the business book, I guess the by accident I picked it up, was Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and I just had an airport and had to read something, and it was like one of those fast books you pick up, and I don't know, it's something like if I would have read it 6 months earlier or 6 months later, maybe it wouldn't have had the same impact. decided then that I was going to teach. In order to learn, I would teach it. I met Stephen Covey one day and I told him I was doing this. He says, "You making any money off me?" And I said, "Well, kind of indirectly. I'm helping my people, my organization." He said, "Oh, well, then that's what it's supposed to do." But yeah, it's been fun. It's been great.
Oh, that's awesome. And again, kind of just speaks to the timing of it kind of
That's right.
landing in your lap was perfectly timed. Yeah, no, all of those books. There's actually a few that he's written that I
That's
know,
right. Yeah.
yeah, that have
Even
made
for
some
kids.
impact.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, massive. Movie or TV?
Oh, Moneyball.
Moneyball, okay.
Yeah, not because it's an Academy Award. It's like it's trust the data.
Okay, yeah.
And when I read that, I read that when I watched that movie, I probably watched it 3 times in a space of 2 3 weeks, just because the thought process of understanding that data can lead you to a place was I was in the right moment at the right time again, and just understanding and based on a true story of the Astros, I think it was, and it was just amazing to see how when you look at data and you understand how to use data, and you got to do a whole bunch of other things with it, not just the data, right?
That's right. You can't just
But
look at the data.
just look at the data. But I thought it was a great depiction of what data can do if used properly. And so I think it's one of the movies I've recommended for people in the world. Lots of good stuff like Godfather is a great movie and all that stuff. But as far as learning movie, I thought that was great.
Okay, awesome. No, and really good, right? Because again, based on a real story,
That's
obviously
right.
very enjoyable, right? Like the way that they translated it for the cinema. But yeah, good characters.
Absolutely.
Lastly, we've talked a little bit about podcasts.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite podcast? Do you have a series that you're listening to?
Podcasts, I don't know that I have a favorite one. I think it's there's two types of podcasts. First of all, a Deepak Chopra type podcast, which kind of refills the spirit every now and then. I
Hmm.
think is great. It's been around for a very long time. I've listened to and read his books for many years, and it was just like that whole. It's the right kind of spiritual balance that I thought was interesting and fit me. But other podcasts, which again fits with some of the counsel I give people, is that do not be shy to learn about your trade. And there's many podcasts that help you think about either a piece of what you do. So I want to talk about technology, AI, or whatever have you, and then finding your areas that have diverse guests and listening to those stories and how they came about understanding a part of something that you have to figure out that just kind of gives you an edge forward. So the variety is quite wide.
Right. So it almost goes back to what we had talked about originally, right? Being open to the experience, being open to what's out there, whether or not it's within your industry or just even tangential,
100%.
really kind of looking for those other ways to learn and develop and grow.
People who think before it happens, this is coming. Oh yeah, why is it coming?
Right.
And to them, it's already there, right? But to you, maybe not. And so it's interesting to see how people are predicting things like way ahead of time. And I got to tell you that a lot of people over time have predicted certain tendencies or what was going to be most popular or technology, but not just technology, that these things were coming because they were privy to either to the information or their imagination actually worked in sync with the speed of development. And
Right.
I think it's interesting to see how many people were actually right about. I look at Star Trek. I mean, pick up your phone. And
It's like, wait a second,
that's
that's our
right.
reality.
That's right.
Should have never made that show.
There you go.
We'd be fine. So Walter, we're gonna wrap up.
Yes, sir.
Anybody afterwards, where can they find you?
Well, we just launched a website, walterlamothe.com, for sure on LinkedIn. And with time, we're going to just evolve the type of communication so that there'll be lots of ways to access it. But walterlamothe.com for now. We're at the beginning. We're just starting. And you can look forward to many podcasts where I'll be doing your role to other people. And I think that's going to be a fun part of the business as well, because I think it's great to talk about people that are doing successful things, but at 18, they had no clue they'd end up there. And everybody's got a story, right? I have one, but everyone does. You do. Everybody has a story. It's interesting to see. So if you're 35 years old and you want to go somewhere, what's your limit? The answer is none.
Awesome. The world is your oyster,
That's right.
right?
Exactly.
That's why we
That's
have
right. That's
the
right.
world up behind us. There we go.
There you go. By sheer coincidence, I'm telling you.
That's
Okay,
it.
all good. Thank you so much.
Well, hey, thank you. I truly appreciate it. Like we said, kicking off, what a great time to, spend
Yes,
the
it
time
is actually.
together.
Absolutely.
It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Cheers.
Alrighty, take care of yourself.
Thank you. Bye.